Hi and welcome to another episode of PA Voter Information Network. I am your host, Larry DeMarco, and today we are here with Representative Leanne Krueger-Braneky of the Pennsylvania Legislative 161st District. Leanne, correct me if I'm wrong, that is Swarthmore, Nether Providence, Brookhaven, Aston, okay, help me out for the rest.
Rutledge, Rose Valley, Ridley Township, and one little part of Springfield Township.
Very good. Thank you for being a guest on PA Voter Information Network.
Thanks so much for inviting me to be here today.
Especially when you are my representative. Glad to have you. The Supreme Court has recently issued the Janus decision where public workers who are not members of unions no longer have to pay their fair share for services. You are a labor advocate. What's the response going to be to such a difficult decision for union rights?
So first of all, we need to be clear about what we're talking about here. Last week's decision by the U.S. Supreme Court was the biggest attack on organized labor that we've seen from the court in 40 years. And essentially what this decision does is folks who are represented by a union, whether they're paying dues or not, still have the opportunity to get services and to get collective bargaining and to get a better contract because their union representatives are fighting for them. It's been illegal to charge someone dues if they don't want to pay them since 1947, but you've had to pay a fair share fee, to pay for your share of the cost to operate the bargaining unit for the union. What the Supreme Court did last year was struck it down. And Ruth Bader Ginsburg has said that this is the same thing as telling a restaurant, someone can walk into your restaurant, look at the menu, choose anything they want, and not have to pay for it. That's what the Supreme Court did to our unions. And this has been an organized attack by far right-wing interests. They know that labor unions traditionally have been stakeholders of the Democratic Party, and they've been working as hard as they can to erode their power. That's what the Supreme Court's decision did last week.
What is the Democratic response going to be?
So last week, within hours of the decision, many of us were gathered outside of the federal courthouse here to protest and to say that we are going to stand with our brothers and sisters in labor to fight harder than ever. The Democrats introduced a bill to strengthen collective bargaining rights. That's something we could do by making the election process easier for new union employees. And so I was a proud co-sponsor of that bill. It was introduced right after the Janus decision. And I signed on to a letter with many of my colleagues in the House denouncing the Janus decision. Now, I should say, though, the Republicans are on the move, too. In the week since the decision has come down, there have been 2 new bills introduced to attack labor rights, to make it harder for folks to organize, harder for them to bargain collectively, and we know that these are attacks on the power of unions. And so whether it's coming from the Supreme Court or right from our state capitol in Harrisburg, our brothers and sisters in labor are under attack right now.
You are a sponsor of a Metoo bill and a leader in anti-harassment in Harrisburg. Can you explain what your efforts are?
Sure. So last fall, I, like so many others, saw the news on the Harvey Weinstein scandal, and I saw women starting to go to social media to share their own stories of having been harassed. I'm one of just 42 women who serve in our state legislature. We're less than 19% of the total. And so I felt a responsibility to say, yes, this can happen to anyone. So I went on social media and shared a story of having been harassed by a college professor 20 years ago. What happened next, Larry, was that women who work in the Capitol started to come to me and tell me their own personal stories. And many of them had been harassed and even assaulted by legislators, by lobbyists, by people who work in the Capitol. And I needed to do something in response. So I started to look at all of the legislation that had been introduced in other places. I drafted the Metoo bill, House Bill 1965, which was introduced back in January. I met multiple times with all of the stakeholders that support women who are survivors of sexual harassment and assault, and we introduced the bill. This bill, as we speak today, has been sitting in the Labor and Industry Committee for over 6 months. It's got more bipartisan support than any other bill that's been introduced on this topic, and yet the only things that have been voted on so far in the House are 2 Republican-sponsored resolutions to study the problem of sexual harassment for another year. There have been 25 bills introduced by my colleagues and I. So in June, when all of these bills were sitting in committee ready for a vote, the House Republican leadership decided, okay, we need to do something about sexual harassment. And the only things they ran were 2 Republican-sponsored resolutions that were introduced without any feedback from Democrats and without any co-sponsors from the Democratic side of the aisle to study the problem. We're going to use taxpayer money to create a new task force to study the problem of sexual harassment for another year. That is the only action that's been taken so far in Harrisburg on this issue.
So for people who are watching and say, this is not okay, what can people do?
So we have called on the Republicans to schedule a hearing. The majority chairman, who's got the sole power to decide what bills run out of his committee, has told me he will hold one in September. We need to hold them to that. We need to be calling our legislators and telling them we want a hearing on the sexual harassment bill package, and we want Harrisburg to take action. You only need to pick up a newspaper in any part of Pennsylvania right now to read a story of another legislator accused of harassment or improper use of taxpayer funds to pay a secret settlement. One of our colleagues up in Berks County paid out almost $250,000 of taxpayer resources on a secret settlement that I didn't know about until I read it in the Philadelphia Inquirer.
And you are calling out both sides, both Republican and Democrats. You are bipartisan on this, are you not?
Yes. No, I believe that if there's been an investigation, if you have been found to have harassed or even assaulted a woman in the Capitol, then you should resign. And I've called on both Democrats and Republicans to resign, as has Governor Wolf.
Across the country right now, women only earn 79 cents on the dollar statistically as to male counterparts. In Pennsylvania, it's worse. And for minorities, it's even worse than that. What can be done? What is being done? And why is what's already there not good enough?
So Democrats in the House and Senate have been introducing bills on equal pay since before I was sworn in. Brian Sims in the House, Senator Judy Schwank and Tartaglione in the Senate have been leaders on this issue, also Maria Donatucci in the House, and session after session after session they have introduced bills on equal pay. I've co-sponsored the bills as they've come through. None of those bills have gotten a hearing. I think you're starting to see a trend. Good ideas come from Democratic legislators, real solutions to fix challenging problems, and they get parked in a committee and they never even see the light of day. So Governor Wolf took action at the beginning of June. He signed an executive order that had to do with state employees. So it's a small step forward, but he took the action that was within his purview. And under his executive order, when women apply for a job with the state, they cannot be asked about their salary history. And that's important, and that's the same substance of the bills that have been introduced in the House and Senate, because if women start off making less and then a future employer looks at salary history, they're basing their salary offer on that information versus what they would be paying for someone who is skilled and qualified for that position, regardless of gender. So we need to enact legislation across the state, but those bills haven't even seen the light of day in committee yet.
So there's problems, there's solutions, but no one's acting on these. Part of the problem is, as you mentioned, that there's not enough women legislators. And what call to action have you been drumbeating to the women of Pennsylvania?
So there's not enough women legislators. We also don't have enough Democrats. The Democrats have a super minority in the House and the Senate. That means that we can have the best proposal that's ever been written, but the Speaker of the House can unilaterally decide, no, it's not going to run. The same thing happens in the Senate. So I've been recruiting women to run and recruiting Democrats to run all over Pennsylvania. I'm a co-chair of the House Democratic Campaign Committee. That's the body that recruits and raises money and supports good candidates to run for office. I've been very, very active in recruiting candidates all over the place, and in particular women, because Pennsylvania ranks 49th in the country right now for percentage of women in elected office. The only state doing worse than us is Mississippi. So it's time for a change, and I believe that starts with electing women and more Democrats to the state legislature this year.
Leanne, there's also a group called Emerge that helps women candidates. Is that right?
Yes.
What services do they provide?
So Emerge Pennsylvania started in Pennsylvania in the 2016 election, and this is an entity that trains women to run for office. Now, I wish Emerge had existed when I was a first-time candidate. It wasn't active in Pennsylvania yet, but my colleagues Mary Jo Daly and Tina Davis brought Emerge to Pennsylvania. They have a phenomenal program that has trained women to run, and women are running and winning at pretty high percentages. Carolyn Comita, my colleague in the House, who won a seat in 2016 by 25 votes in Chester County, she was the first Emerge grad to win office in Pennsylvania.
The reason why I asked you is because I have to tell you, I notice night and day the change in candidates who've been through this program. It's almost like a master's degree or a PhD in being a candidate. It's really effective. I understand you're a co-sponsor for a bill to increase the minimum wage. Can you talk about that?
So Pennsylvania has the lowest minimum wage of every state around us, including Ohio and including West Virginia. It's time to change that. I mean, there's been study after study that's shown that you can't support a family on the current minimum wage here in Pennsylvania. So there's been multiple efforts to increase the minimum wage. I'm a co-sponsor of a bill that my colleague Patty Kim introduced, would raise the minimum wage to $12 and then index it to inflation. It would rise after that. Governor Wolf had an executive order where he raised the minimum wage for state employees, but in the same way that he's taken action on equal pay, he only controls the employees that work for the state without the legislature also taking action. And there's been some analyses that have shown we'll actually save taxpayer money, because right now, through corporate welfare, we're subsidizing the health care and even food stamps for people who are working full-time but only earning the minimum wage, and they can't support themselves. And because their employers are not paying what they should, our social safety net has had to make up the difference. And if we increase the minimum wage in Pennsylvania, we'd actually reduce the amount that we're spending in things like Medicaid and food stamps.
What is the status of the fee or tax on Marcellus Shale drilling?
So when I ran for office for the first time 4 years ago, I talked to voters about a severance tax and the fact that we're the only state in the country with a fracking industry that doesn't have a severance tax. Texas has one, Alaska has one. It's been enacted under Republican governors and Democratic governors. This is a nonpartisan issue, and the overwhelming percentage of Pennsylvanians support it. But 4 years later, we still don't have a severance tax in Pennsylvania, and the reason is simple. There are 203 registered oil and gas lobbyists working the Capitol. There are 203 of us in the State House. There's one of them for every one of us. And so their power is strong because we have no campaign finance limits in Pennsylvania. They make huge contributions to the Speaker of the House, to the Chair of the Environmental Resources and Energy Committee, where the bills sit. They make contributions to the House Republican Campaign Committee. And because of that, they are essentially buying votes. And so even though the overwhelming percentage of Pennsylvanians think that this is just the fair thing to do, it's been blocked every step of the way. And the governor has proposed it in one budget after another for 4 years. This year he got an on-time budget, but he did not get the severance tax. And I think the only thing that will change it is more folks going to Harrisburg who are willing to vote for it.
So Leanne, we balanced a budget on time this year. Can you tell us about what you like and what you don't like?
So we got a budget on time this year. I wouldn't say that it's truly balanced, though.
Talk about it, please.
So as per our Constitution, the budget is due on June 30th or July 1st of every year. And this is the first year that I've been in office that we've actually seen the budget get done on time. Now, I think there's a correlation between it being an election year and folks being willing to work together more so than in past years. And there are some good things in the budget. We got $100 million more for basic education funding. That is critical to us, especially in Delaware County. We were able to increase pre-K funding by $25 million. We were able to implement a new grant program of $60 million for school safety, because we know this is an issue that parents and communities are really concerned about post-Parkland, post-Sandy Hook. And so those are all positive aspects of this budget. We also increased the Department of Environmental Protection's budget for the first time in a while. They'll be able to hire some new staff positions, and that's critical to us in Delaware County because we need folks who are monitoring pipeline construction and pipeline spills because it's impacting our communities. The bad news, though, is that this budget still borrows money, relies on numbers that aren't fully there. And before I ran for office, I worked with small business owners. And I will tell you, if any of the small business owners who I worked with balanced their budget the way the state does, they'd be bankrupt and probably under IRS investigation at this point. So it's better than we've seen in past years. This is a budget that I've actually voted for. I voted against a number of budgets previous to this, but it still doesn't really fix the problem. And the problem is that we've got a fundamentally unfair tax structure where multinational corporations and the richest of the rich and big oil and gas companies are paying less than the rest of us. And if we really want a sustainable budget that provides real property tax relief, for example, in Pennsylvania, then we need to do the right thing and enact a severance tax, close corporate tax loopholes, and make our tax system fair for the average family.
So they're even paying less. I know in federal taxes they're paying less, but they're paying less on a state level as well.
So when you talk about corporate taxes, the system is rigged so that if you're an out-of-state multinational corporation, you're able to get out of a lot of things. And there's a procedure called combined reporting, which the governor's been pushing, I've been pushing. It levels the playing field for our small businesses in Pennsylvania, local businesses. We haven't been able to get that enacted yet.
Well, Representative, we'll leave it there, but I want to thank you for being a guest on Pennsylvania Voter Information Network.
Thanks so much, Larry.
We have been here with Representative Leanne Krueger-Braneky, and I am your host, Larry DeMarco. If you like this video, please forward it to the people on your contact list, social media friends, and subscribe to the channel. We are signing off. Tune in next time. Bye for now.